Chapter 9, Trail's End. Trailing Dog, we wound our way along a well-worn path among the trees. It was barely raining now. The sun was beginning to shine through the clouds. Every few steps, we would find another pool of water tinted pinkish red. Even though the faint odor wasn't exactly blood-like, we knew we were on a trail of evil. We just didn't know where it would lead. Howie, as usual, was well ahead of us. Suddenly he called out, "Pop! Don't come any closer! Stay where you are!" Chester arched his back, his hair rising straight and tall like a Mohawk Indian's. I suppose I should have been alarmed too, but there was something about Howie's warning only Chester that made me brave enough to run ahead. Howie stood beside an empty bottle. Dog was sniffing at it. "Uncle Harold," Howie whined, "the blood ends here. Pop isn't safe. They're going to make him into soup." "Soup?" I said. I was completely at a loss as to what he meant until I read the label. "Catsup," I read out loud, though of course I pronounced it ketchup. "That doesn't say cat soup?" Howie asked, surprised. Chester was now close enough to hear our conversation. "And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen," he said. "Further evidence of the damage to the brain caused by chewing on bones and chasing sticks." "I believe," Dog said, "that your friend is making a crack about dogs," he growled. I was about to step in when Howie yipped loudly. "Pop," he said. "Dog! Uncle Harold! Wait a minute. I don't understand. If the trail of blood—" "Ketchup," Chester interjected. "Whatever," said Howie. "If it doesn't lead to this bottle, then where does it lead?" "There," Dog said matter-of-factly, forgetting his anger toward Chester. We looked ahead, and in a clearing was the house from the night before. It seemed less forbidding by day, and I couldn't help remembering Chester's name for it. An American House of Dr. E.A.D. "You've brought us full circle," I said. I was beginning to believe that there really was something to Chester's suspicions. "Why?" "Because that's where you'll find Bud and Spud," Dog said. "And if I'm not mistaken, you'll find your family there too." "What are they doing there?" Howie asked Dog. "Well, if it's Bud and Spud, you mean," said Dog. "They live there. As for your kin, I couldn't say. All I know is this is where the trail is leading us." Chester eyed Dog coolly, doing a pretty fair imitation of Humphrey Bogart on The Late Show. "So," he said in a low voice, "if Bud and Spud live there, that means you live there too." Dog nodded, the ribbon of drool bobbing up and down with his head. "Why didn't you tell us that last night?" Dog shrugged. "You were so shook up by the place," he said. "I didn't have a chance. Besides, I liked your story better than the truth. Listen, fellas, it looks like it's going to start coming down again. What do you say we move this conversation indoors?" Somewhat reluctantly, we agreed. "A trap," Chester muttered as we crossed the clearing and drew nearer to the house. "We're doomed, Harold. Have you any last words?" "When's breakfast?" I asked, taking hope from the light in what looked to be a kitchen. Dog headed in that direction and scratched at the back door. I heard footsteps. They sounded familiar, like those of— "Erna!" Chester squealed as the door opened, and an eagle-eyed, hawk-nosed woman peered down at us. "The housekeeper, Harold! My worst fantasies are coming true. Bud and Spud are really Fritz and Hans. There's a laboratory somewhere, a laboratory where experiments are done on innocent little—" Before he could finish his sentence, the woman at the door grabbed him up into her arms and held him tight. "Nice, kitty," she said. "Why joyful? Who have you brought home? Oh, I know. These must be our guest lot's pets. Now, won't they be happy to see you?" Chester looked at me wildly. "Bark!" he hissed. "Oh, Chester, you know how I feel about— Unless you have something better to do this morning than live, Harold, bark!" "Well, since you put it that way," I said, and set about woofing for everything I was worth. Howie joined in with some high-pitched yips of his own. Without thinking, the woman put her hands to her ears, and in so doing, dropped Chester to the ground. Sorry, guys, I'm getting tongue-tied. He lost no time in bolting for the door, but found it closed. "No escape," he snapped. Dog, meanwhile, just sat back and watched as if the three of us had gone completely mad. Stop it, the woman cried. Stop this racket at once, here! You'll raise the dead. Too late for that, Chester cracked, and started for the door, leaning to the rest of the house. Howie and I ran after him, barking all the while, only to be stopped by the shadow that fell across the threshold of the room. What's all the fuss? Said a voice I recognized as Bud's. I looked up and saw that he was rubbing sleep from his eyes. Chester tried to squeeze between Bud's legs in the door jamb, but Bud moved just in time to catch him in the ribs. Now hold on there, cat, he said. Where do you think you're going? Why's everyone such an uproar this morning? I think they're just worked up over being out in the rain all night, the woman said. Ain't that so, critters? I'll give 'em all some breakfast, and you go on upstairs and finish your sleeping. I saw Chester twitching to be free. When his struggles got him nowhere, he sighed heavily and dropped his head. Bud reached down and picked him up. Nah, he said. I hear the others coming. Why don't we all have breakfast? He carried Chester to the kitchen table and sat down. Well, Chester said over Bud's elbow, you're getting your last request. I felt my eyes tearing up again. I guess breakfast isn't so important, I said. What I really wish is that I could see the Monroes. Looks like you're getting that wish too, Uncle Harold, Howie said. Here they come. All at once, the room was filled with people. Toby ran to me and threw his arms around my neck just as I had imagined only an hour earlier. Mr. Monroe patted me, then scratched me between the ears. Mrs. Monroe cooed at Howie, and Pete ignored all of us. It was almost like being home. Almost, except for the strange woman with the eagle eyes, the scar-faced dog, the man at the table who wouldn't let Chester go, and the other man at the door who even at 6 o'clock in the morning was fondling a knife. The woman began to busy herself at the refrigerator. How about some milk, folks? I don't drink milk, Bud said. Chester and I exchanged worried glances. Now how are you going to grow up to be big and strong if you don't drink your milk? The woman said. Your brother drinks it all the time, and look at him. Spud flexed a muscle. I'm so glad the animals are safe, Mrs. Monroe said. She took Chester from Bud and petted him gently. I was so worried I hardly slept. Well, I told you Dog knew his way around here, said Bud. I knew there was nothing to worry about so long as they were with him. And fortunately, we were with you, Mrs. Monroe said. I can't thank you enough for taking us in out of that terrible storm, Bud. The other woman shook her head. I have to laugh every time I hear him called by it, she said. It isn't his right name, you know. Chester jumped out of Mrs. Monroe's arms, landing by my side. This is it, he said. Meet Fritz and Hans, the long-lost Transylvanian twins. No, said Mrs. Monroe, brushing cat hairs off her borrowed robe. No, this here's Buford. The other one is Spaulding. They picked up the Hosilla nicknames at college. College, said Mr. Monroe. Well, sure, the woman replied. My boys graduated cum laude. Buford here's an architect. Spaulding practices law. And one of these days, he'll get it right, Bud said with a loud guffaw. Spud crossed the room and whacked him one. Boys, said the woman. Let's set a good example for the youngins. And she nodded to Toby and Pete. Sorry, Mama, Spud said, charging. We'll behave ourselves, said Bud. Can I help you out with breakfast? Sure can, Buford. Why don't you set up the table? And Spaulding, put that knife to use for once and cut us some bread. Before anything else, however, I'd appreciate your feeding these poor critters. Would have been out all night in the wet. 5 minutes later, we found ourselves eating chopped steak out of silver bowls. There must be good money in architecture, I observed. Not if all his houses look like this one, said Chester. Well, in any event, so much for your evil spirits. Yeah, Pop, Howie said. These folks are real nice. A little weird, maybe, but nice. Thanks, said Dog, slurping thirstily at a bowl of Perrier. I think so, too. I had to admit that Bud and Spud did seem a lot less threatening in the light of day, and Howie said they were definitely a little weird. Eccentric, I guess you'd say. But they were far from evil. And the noises we heard last night, Chester said, exercising his forehead muscles. Bud, Spud, and the Monroes escaping from the rain, I said. It's obvious, isn't it? But weren't there noises before that, said Chester. Didn't we all hear noises throughout the night? That was probably Bud and Spud, Dog explained. We looked to him for an explanation. Well, remember I told you that they were going out looking for something last night? They were going to find it, remember? I don't know what it is, but I'll bet that's just what all the noise was about. Just then, Bud, who had left the room while we were eating, appeared at the door with a cage in his hand. He held it high so that no one could see its contents. And now we have the answer, Chester said. If it's a rabbit, you can bet these two clowns were Fritz and Hans long before they were Buford and Spaulding, or Bud and Spud. Mama, Bud announced, this is for you. We was going to save it for Mother's Day, but we know how much you've been wanting one. You keep such an eye out on us, we couldn't look during the day. We had to wait till a clear night to fetch one. Oh, now, Buford, cut the preamble and just gimme. I'm dying from the suspense. Well, all right, Mama, said Bud, lowering the cage. Here it is, then. It's all yours. Everyone's eyes were on the cage as it came into view. I don't know about anyone else, but I was ready to see a rabbit there. A rabbit perhaps with fangs. A rabbit with red eyes. The last thing I was expecting was, a baby skug! Oh, boys, come here, let me give you a hug. Happy Mother's Day, said Bud. The two sons dutifully kissed their mother's cheeks as she took the cage from them. Well, hello, you little darling, she said to the thing in the cage. We'll have to get you descented, but first you'll need a name. What am I going to call you? Scanicula? I suggested to Chester. Ha ha, very funny, he replied through gritted teeth. Then mumbling something about lunatics, he wandered off to a corner of the room where he curled up for a nap. What's the matter? I asked, joining him. Suffering from post-St. George's Day letdown? He grunted and shut his eyes. Soon Howie and Dog were huddled in the corner with us, and we were feeding the warmth of the early morning sun as it poured in through a window. I was lost in my own thoughts about the night we had just passed, a night full of adventures and dreams. It had been fun in a way. At least that's the way it seemed now that it was over. It was scary being lost in the woods, but I realized that the greatest fears that had caused my own imagination, that and Chester's story, which I laugh now to think I had actually believed. I picked up only snatches of the conversation in the room. I heard Pete asking for permission to call his friend Kyle. Yes, so early in the morning because Kyle was going away for the rest of the day. And no, it couldn't wait. It was important. Really important. I heard him talking in a hushed voice on the phone, then getting excited, then shouting, It's happened! It's happened! I heard his mother ask what all the commotion was about, and then I heard him say something about rabbits. My eyes opened first, then Chester's, then Howie's, and finally Dog's. We all listened as Pete explained his phone call. It's my other merit badge project, he was saying. The secret one. Kyle bought a rabbit, see? And I've been taking Banicula over to his house, and well, we're going to get badges in rabbit raising. And last night, they had their first fryers. That's what you call the baby, see? And one of them, this is the best part. It's so cool. One of the little boy bunnies looks just like Banicula. Chester's eyes glazed over. He didn't move. And for the first time since I've known him, which is a long, long time, he was speechless. Pop looks sick, Howie said. Better bring the cat a tonic. I don't think it's medicine Chester needs, I said. I think it's a vacation. Looks like his brain started out on one without him, said Dog. I thought we were on a vacation, Uncle Harold, Howie said. It's been fun, hasn't it? Even the scary part, right? I nodded and started to drift off to sleep. It hadn't been such a bad vacation, really. There was only one thing missing. Right then, I couldn't place it. But then the smell woke me up and I remembered. S'mores! Fresh from the microwave. Toby gave me the first one out. Good old Toby. As I began chewing contentedly, the Monroes began to sing. Someone's in the kitchen with Dinah. Someone's in the kitchen, I know. Howie, Dog, and I howled along, and everyone was happy. Everyone but Chester, that is. He hadn't left his spot in the corner. His eyes were staring off into space. His lips were moving, but not in rhythm to the song. It wasn't until we stopped singing that I caught a few words, and even then I wasn't sure what to make of them. Perhaps you, dear reader, will know what he meant when he said, "When the moon comes out on St. George's Day, the sun also rises, and he's here to stay." I wonder what that means too. And that is the end of our book. I hope everybody enjoyed it, despite me being cringe, doing all the crazy accents and all. So I really do hope you all enjoyed it, and I hope you all will join me for my next reading.